On this episode of the Endurance Hour podcast, running and riding outside versus indoors now that it's nice outside. Half marathon racing, what the final preparations are for you for your first or 10th half Ironman run, and why beginners should hold back on running the distance in training. How do you stay focused on race courses when the course isn't scenically exciting? What's your favorite distance and why? And how to manage training and triathlon burnout. The Endurance Hour podcast starts right now.
Are you listening? Damn.
So let's begin with a little recap or follow-up. Last week, when we were celebrating Wendy's birthday, on her birthday for the podcast, episode 350, I mentioned that I was ordering and going to receive my Garmin, was it 945? Is that what it is? Yeah. So I got it a couple days later. I've used it since. I rode outside, I swam with it, and I ran outside yesterday, Wendy, and it works great. I had to update the firmware, which is one of the first things you want to do. But I was so tired. My first outdoor ride of the year was this weekend.
That's
Did
nice.
a nice little 20-miler. But I knew it was going to feel different, like it always does once you get off the trainer or on the stationary bike and go outside with gravity, wind, hills, undulation of the terrain. And I was spent. Body was sore. I was spent the whole day just for one 20-mile, 1 hour. I went kind of hard. 1 hour ride. I thought, yeah, this will be easy, 20 miles. But it was quite taxing, and I was just spent.
Did you do it on Sunday?
No, I did it on Saturday, and Sunday
Was the
it
time
rained.
change?
Well, it rained
And
like
there
crazy.
was that, and we lost an hour. So I was gonna
Yep.
suggest maybe you were exhausted because you lost an hour.
No, it was just it was a decent ride. I found I had to climb up to get to a spot out of my neighborhood area, and then I just went flat because I just wanted to get into a groove and ride. And I found, I know an area that will give me 20 miles. And so I did that, and not much wind to speak of, but the next day it rained, so I'm glad I got that out of the way.
Nice.
And then yesterday I had a nice little run outside, and that felt good. Always feels better to run outside, and I always feel like I go a little bit faster because, I don't know why I feel faster outside than on a treadmill, because the treadmill, you stick to whatever pace you're running, but outside it's like I can just go on feel and not have to do what the treadmill says. If you just stick it at 7 miles an hour.
Right. Because outside you're on undulating terrain and your paces change throughout the course of the run depending on the terrain. And overall, your pace could be faster. It's interesting that you said that because I did a really good run outside yesterday in the rain yesterday morning. And I was running faster than I felt like I was running. I was having a really good day. So then I'm like, okay, I have a little extra time. And I was running near lifetime. So I ran inside just to feel that, okay, this was my outside pace. I wonder what that feels like on the treadmill, because I don't run on the treadmill very often. And it felt like it was forced inside. And so just for you to make that comment is exactly what I felt is, okay, this pace was, definitely easier for me outside, which is, back in the day when I used to spend a lot more time on the treadmill, I could run faster on the treadmill and it felt easier than it did outside. So I think it's just where you run more. I don't know. Depends on the treadmill.
Yeah. And how you feel, or if it's like yesterday when I did run, there were some areas that clouds were kind of rolling through a little bit here and there. So sometimes I'd be in the shade, sometimes I'd be in the running into a sun spot or sunny area, I was like, oh, it's kind of a rejuvenating. It's like, oh, I get to run in the sun. Even I think it was 58, 60 degrees outside, kind of chilly, not too bad, but even that warm, direct sun felt so good versus in the shade where the shades, boom, drops down quite a bit. Anyhow, I'm excited about my new watch. The heart rate monitor works great. Great stats when you use the Garmin Connect. I'm not an ambassador or anything, but I'm just saying that Garmin's been a nice product to have, and I'm glad that I paid the extra money to get this 945.
Nice. Yeah, I'm happy with mine for the most part.
For the most part?
Yeah, I mentioned some comments last week about the elevation and barometer issues I've been having, but they've really good customer service, so it's kept me using the Garmin.
And you're doing the ultras, so you need to know, and also off-road running, so you want to know some of those altitude and barometer and be able to see the maps afterwards.
Exactly.
So inside the T2 Endurance Club Facebook group, which is a closed group, we've got quite a few members in there. We ask you to answer a couple of questions before we join. In fact, I'm looking at it right now. We've got 3 requests for members, and we also have a question what we're going to get to about a beginner Ironman tips and tricks, I guess. So we've got Grant, who asked to be in the group, and the questions we ask are: how'd you hear about us? What kind of events are you training for? And if you have a Training Peaks account. Why do we ask the Training Peaks account question, Wendy?
Well, we have over 20-ish training programs that we sell on Training Peaks, and most triathletes / endurance athletes are familiar with what Training Peaks is. It's a software app that you can, purchase training plans, keep a training log. And so it just kind of tells us if someone knows about Training Peaks, they're a real person.
Well, Grant seems pretty serious. He heard about us through a YouTube video. We've got a couple thousand on YouTube, the Endurance Hour YouTube channel, discussing a couch to Ironman training plan. How's that different than a beginner plan, Wendy?
That's a great question that I get kind of a lot. The couch to Ironman training plan is 24 weeks. Our beginner Ironman is 16 weeks. So it's just a longer duration, longer progression of volume and intensity. And it just starts you out on, 3 to 4 hours per week compared to our beginner plan that starts you out on maybe 5 to 6 hours per week. So it's just a slower progression, mainly.
He is training for, he says, he's trying to find a training plan for Ironman Chattanooga in September of this year. It was the Little Debbie's Ironman Chattanooga a few years ago. Maybe it's still called that.
I think it is.
And didn't you do it?
I did it in 2017.
The full or the half?
The full.
Full. Okay. So he's looking for a plan for that. I'm sure one of the plans that we have can be very similar or be a good blueprint for Grant, don't you think?
Yeah, and which the one he might want to consider, again, it has to do with length. Does he have 24 to 32 weeks to train, or does he only have 12 to 16 weeks to train? Because that kind of will determine, where he's at, and also his ability and his current, his past experience, current fitness level, and his goal. We also, we don't have a plan specifically for Ironman Chattanooga, but we do have Ironman plans specific to Florida, California, and I believe Arizona. I can't remember that third plan. That's really more tailored towards the terrain of those specific courses. And those are available on Training Peaks as well.
And today is the 17th, and he's looking to do one in September. So I don't know the actual date, but I'll just put the 14th. I'm calculating how many weeks between now and then. And it looks like it's 25 weeks, 6 days. So 26 weeks, basically. 5.5 months, almost 6 months. So the beginner one would be fine?
The beginner one would be fine, yeah. I think 6 to 9 months is a good period of time for someone to train for an Ironman. Definitely, unless you have experience and you have a lot of experience doing some 70.3s and you've done an Ironman before, our 12-week advance plan would not be enough time.
Okay. Well, he doesn't have a Training Peaks account right now, which is free, but we're going to approve him in the group. I'm going to send him a message as well, letting him know that we approved him and, hey, how he can take advantage of that. We are going to do a special discount offer for one of our members, and it's because we're celebrating Wendy's birthday month. She had her birthday last week, and we had a question from Anu. And it has to do with a beginner Ironman that she's preparing for. Do you want to kind of summarize her question to us and what she's hoping to accomplish this year, 2022?
Yeah, so she mentioned that she's training for a couple 70.3s, one in June, one in July, in her preparation for a full 140.6 distance that she's never done before. She commented how she doesn't have a coach. And my assumption is she might not even have a training plan. And so she was asking for any beginner tips for training for an Ironman. And, there definitely are quite a few. And if she went back, or anyone for that matter went back and looked at the Endurance Hour YouTube channel, We've created so many videos to answer a lot of questions, such as news as well as others, specific to Ironman 70.3, as well as just triathlon and endurance sports in general. A lot comes to mind when I'm thinking of an Ironman, such as open water swimming, following a progressive training plan based on your experience and how much time you have to train, making sure you're kind of tunnel vision and focusing on yourself and not getting overwhelmed by all the information that other athletes as well as coaches might tell you. I know with social media, I think people get involved in a lot of groups, and it could get, especially as a beginner, can get overwhelming taking all this advice. You want to make sure you understand the advice and that you're able to apply it to yourself. And just because the advice they're giving you works for them doesn't necessarily mean it works for you. And so, Dave and I talk about that in all the training plans that we've created. We have videos before each week and or each phase of training. And just like we talk about on the podcast, we actually have videos within our training plans that discuss things that especially beginners don't know. I was a beginner once. I've been a coach for a long time. I know what a beginner doesn't know. So we try to provide all these answers and answer their questions within the training plan. So I think the top advice would be to find a program that's going to work for you and follow a plan to the best of your ability, and make sure you do ask a lot of questions and don't go into it without a support group, whether that's your spouse, your family, or a group of friends, local club. That's really important as you're training. Not necessarily that's something, you don't have to train with other people, but just having that network and that support group like we've provided in the T2 Endurance Facebook group to help support you and know that you're not alone on your journey.
And we've produced hundreds of videos, and it sounds like I'm exaggerating, but hundreds of videos. Well, probably nearly 1,000 since we started doing this over 5 years ago, both Wendy and myself. And I know for us, when we were creating these programs, it seems like we cover the same topics over and over again within these plans. But these are common questions that beginners ask, or we put ourselves in your shoes, even though we've been doing this for a few decades, each of us. That what would a beginner have a question about, or what are some basics that we take for granted, but they may not. And those things are discussed within these videos, within the training plans. So when you ask questions like this anew, you're going to get these things covered. And as a special birthday celebration of giving back, Wendy has agreed to give you anew 50% off our beginner Ironman training plan on Training Peaks. Just have to email Wendy at wendy@t2coaching.com. And we've also put this inside the T2 Endurance Club, so hopefully she'll see it there if she's not listening. Congratulations. Good luck for your season, and 50% off our Ironman training plan for beginners on Training Peaks. Thank you, Wendy.
Yeah, you're welcome. And one thing I just want to mention, I think another huge tip to know is Ironman or any endurance sport, it's all about pacing and nutrition. So as you're training and preparing for your event, make sure you are thinking about your Ironman pacing plan. You're thinking about your Ironman and practicing your Ironman nutrition plan, because that'll help actually get your mental game in order. That'll help give you a little bit more confidence. And when you get to the event, again, how strong you finish is all about pacing and nutrition.
Yeah. This question from Tim: I have a half marathon in 2 weeks. What do you suggest for my last 2 weekend long runs? This is 2 weeks prior to a half marathon of 13.1 miles.
So I included this question because I used to coach Tim a few years ago, so I know him personally. And when he texted me the question, I laughed because I don't necessarily know how he's been preparing for this half marathon that he has in 2 weeks. So I chatted with him a little bit, and, it's all about a long run. What should be, basically the question was, what should be your longest run before a half marathon? Knowing Tim, knowing he has experiences not only with half marathons, but I coached him to finish his first Ironman in Louisville, is when I'm coaching a more experienced athlete, I'm going to run them, maybe the longest run up to 16 miles before their half marathon because they have experience.
Okay.
So I'm just putting in a little bit more volume for them because they have experience. Now, someone who's never done a half marathon, I may build them up to only maybe 10, 11, 12 miles. Again, it just depends on how much time we have to build up their long run training volume as well as their experience, previous experience. And so in his case, he mentioned that he was on a progressive build of, he did like a 7, 9, 11, then he did a 9, 11, 12. So he's done some ramp ups of mileage and then he backed down his mileage. And so I encouraged him to actually, instead of thinking about a long run, if he's up to 12 miles, keep it at that and start thinking about race pace intensity. So I suggested that he stick with his longest run of 12 miles and incorporate some of his half marathon as well as a little bit faster mile repeats within that 12-mile run. I thought was good for him.
Would you explain to beginners why you usually don't do the full distance in training for example, a half marathon?
They've never done it before. So their longest run is going to be race day. Sometimes when with my experience coaching as well as an athlete, when you've already done the distance in training, come race day, you may experience a poor result, meaning you may not go as strong or as fast or have an experience that you've already dealt with in training. So I like to save that aha, awesome, I just did my first half marathon excitement for race day. And a lot of it is, how long is a half marathon going to take you? Some half marathons can take people 3.5 to 4 hours if you're a beginner. Sometimes a beginner half marathon may take 2 hours or less. So a lot of it just depends on the athlete. But again, as your first time doing a half marathon, I like to save that excitement for race day, that you just completed your first half, not have it be done in training.
So for a more experienced or elite or just experienced, I guess, runner, it's okay to be doing a 14 or 15 or 16 miler in training before a half marathon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely. Because you've done the half marathon. Now you're trying to do it stronger, faster, with less effort. And so putting in longer volumes of training for your long runs, assuming you have just a nice progression, that you're not jumping in too much too soon just to squeeze in a 14, 15 miler before the half, I think is definitely appropriate.
Yeah, I would think that if you do 16, then you have plenty in the tank to go faster and to do a shorter distance. So, I can do 16 at 9-minute pace. I can ramp it up a little bit. I know I have more left, and I'm only doing 13, so I've got that 3 mile worth of extra gas if I want to burn it up toward the end.
Yep.
This one from Tina, and I thought about this one a little bit myself, and I'm trying to think of my answers, but the question is, I am training for Ironman Texas. I heard the course isn't that scenic. What goes on in your head during a race, and how are you able to stay focused when you don't have a lot to look at around you? She assumes that you focus on your pacing, fueling, tactics, and maybe some other things. Is that true? What do you focus on when it's not that cool to look at?
Well, first I want to comment. I did Ironman Texas. I think it was 2017, and the course had changed that year. So the year I did it, the course was actually part of it was on a highway, and we did these like 2 loops on a highway of some sort, and it was really boring. It wasn't the Ironman Texas route that I had registered for. So it was a big disappointment. And I remember at mile 50, I was kind of feeling like bored and just I was looking at my power meter and I was weak. My power numbers were falling. I wasn't focused. And that lasted like 10 miles. And so I understand where she's coming from with this question. And so when I realized I wasn't pushing the effort like I had planned based on looking at my power meter, I'm like, okay, maybe I need some fuel or hydration. And so I actually had some pretzels in my special needs bag that I picked up, and I started eating those, and I started feeling better. And so that was just something I wanted to experience about that type of course. But she's absolutely right. When I'm racing, whether it's in Kona or Cozumel, Hawaii, or sorry, I already mentioned Hawaii, Cozumel, Coeur d'Alene, I've done a lot of like Placid. I've done a lot of scenic races as well as kind of quote unquote boring races. But ultimately I'm focused on my race. I'm focused on my pacing. I'm focused on my nutrition, making sure, because I usually have a plan to eat every either 20, 30 or 40 minutes. And so I'm like, okay, what did I eat the last 30 minutes? What did I eat and drink? I'm focused on the pacing and just trying to stay within what I set out to do, because in an Ironman, like I've already mentioned multiple times, it's all about pacing and nutrition if you want to be successful on the run. And then when I'm on the run is more or less where I kind of more enjoy the scenery.
Yeah. What am I thinking of? I'm thinking Coeur d'Alene has had a new course the last few years. And well, they stopped the Ironman, full Ironman, even though they're bringing it back this year temporarily. That it's a lot of highway now. There's a lot of climbing in the highway, but it's a lot of rolling and climbing and downhills. It's not super scenic because it's just plain out in the middle of nowhere. And even Arizona, in some respects, was some flat out into I think the Indian reservation area where it's kind of it's deserty. So I was thinking about how would I answer this question. I think I would just try to break it up into little pieces, and with, like you said, with the fueling, check your watch, check your notes. Where am I in my next set of fueling? Should I be drinking right now? Maybe I break this up and let me look at the power. Am I consistent? Is this next mile pretty good? If you're going at a good clip, let's say you're going 20 miles an hour. So every 3 minutes, am I on pace? Okay, let me just kind of play with that and see if I'm able to stay consistent. Maybe people are around you. You can, chase a rabbit or just do your own thing. But it's a lot of mind games of breaking it up. Kind of like with the marathon. You're breaking up, all right, I'm going to go to the next aid station, or let me do the next mile. So breaking things up, I think, is helpful when it's not that fun to look at.
Yeah, I agree. And one thing I know, when I mentioned Cozumel has this gorgeous North Shore. And I didn't stop, but I did take my time to enjoy the North Shore scenery. And it was a 3-loop course. So when I passed it, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to come back here because it's so beautiful. I wish I could get off my bike and go dive in the waves. And then, like a place like Kona, you look at the lava fields, and I sometimes have these thoughts of, I can't believe this is lava that has created these islands. That's just kind of a cool thing to think about. But for the most part, I'm focused, before I had a power meter, I'd be focused on my heart rate and making sure I stayed within a certain heart rate zone that I set out to target during my race. So it's, again, I'm definitely focused on race. And I think most people would be focused on their race plan.
Yeah. If you can stay on your plan, think about what's my goal today. That would be helpful. Because I know there's certain things like, oh, that looks like a very similar road that I was just on. I'm thinking about that right now with Coeur d'Alene. Like that looks very similar. Like, oh, it's just a little bit different here, but it's the same old. And it depends on how many loops you do. It's like, I'll come back to it and it'll look more familiar. Like, oh yeah, I was just here, an hour and a half ago.
Yeah.
This one from Julie. Which distance do you enjoy training for the most? And does that differ from the one you enjoy racing the most? I guess this is a personal question to us.
Yeah, I haven't really thought about it. Obviously, I'm the one that included it in this podcast, but I will say, because I have so much experience, I know for a fact when it comes to just running only events, I enjoy the 5K because I can go to my max effort for a 5K. I can max out and feel good. And I enjoy the ultra running, the 50K plus trail events, because number one, because it's on trail. Number two, it's at such a low intensity, and I really enjoy that low intensity going long. The distances, the 10K is just hard. 10K, half marathon, those in between distances to me really have to do with a lot of pacing. And for some reason, they're not my favorite due to like a pacing issue, just due to pacing. I'm weird about that kind of thing. Even though like a couple weeks ago I just PR'd in a half marathon, but I really had to pace it well. And I was proud of myself for allowing myself to pace it well, because I know me. Sometimes I go out too hard because I just want to get it done with. But then I die at the end, and I'm struggling at the end, and I hate that even more. So when it comes to like triathlon, I think the half Ironman is probably my favorite distance for triathlon.
For training and racing?
For training and racing. I do like I get a lot out of the Olympic, and I do get a lot out of the Ironman. But if I had to choose one, I would choose training and racing for the half, because I can use my speed that I have for the Olympic, and I can use my endurance that I have for the half or that I have for the full, and to put together a good half. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Yeah. I think I like the half Ironman distance for both as well. The sprints it's a quickie. The Olympics are a hard effort to be somewhat competitive. You know, for me, I want to be, for me to want to be competitive, there's that, you can't go too slow, too fast, you'll burn out. So there's that hard in between of, I need to average this speed, which is not quite redlining it, but if I go too slow, then I'm not really in the race. But I have to go hard enough to be, feeling like I gave it a good effort. And it's a hard 2.5 hours of going for me. And the half distance feels like I can do that at a strong, solid effort the whole time and be comfortable, but I still have room to kick if I need to, without bonking too much if the training's correct.
Yeah. I thought that was an interesting question, an interesting way to think about, like for you mentioned that you're more competitive at a half, which is part of the reason you like the half. And I always like the half because I can still run and train a certain volume. Like I'll still do 60 and 70 mile rides while training for a half Ironman. Mm-hmm. I don't have to do any longer than that, but I like to do 60 to 70 mile rides. I don't always like to do 80, 100 and plus mile rides training for an Ironman. And
Good
for
point.
a half marathon, I like to run, 10 to 16 miles. Mm-hmm. I don't always like to run beyond 16 miles training for an Ironman. So it just depends. And, when I am in Ironman training and I'll be super focused, it's fun. I will sign up for an Ironman knowing what the training entails and knowing that I'm ready to train for an Ironman. I'm ready to do the 20-mile runs. I'm ready to do the marathon. I'm ready to put in the 100-mile rides. Because there's years that I don't sign up for an Ironman because I don't want to put in the training. Mm-hmm. But for half, I feel like I'm always at that fitness level that I can train for a half time-wise, and I can be competitive in a half time-wise.
I feel like a lot of, not weekend warriors, but a step above that, probably feel the same way about the Olympic. Like, I can do an Olympic this weekend anytime I want. Whether I'm competitive or not, I'm not sure, but I can physically do it. Everyone can do a sprint, most likely, if you're a beginner triathlete, you've been in the sport a couple of years. Like, I can do a sprint. And I can probably do an Olympic if you, just do it. May not do it well, but I could do it. But the half, not everyone's at your stage or at my stage where, sure, I could do it. It'll be painful the next day, but I'm always in the fitness zone where I could do that. And I'm sure a lot of people are probably in that fitness zone of sprint to Olympic at any given moment.
Exactly.
Last question here for the podcast from Kevin. Do you experience training or triathlon burnout? If so, what did you do to reset your mind? If not, how do you prioritize?
Again, another good question. I wouldn't say I've never necessarily experienced training in general burnout. I'm always training to a certain level, that I'm always at the certain fitness level that when I'm ready to race, I can decide, do I want to race sprints, Olympics, halves, fulls, or do I want to do, 5Ks, 10Ks, marathons, ultras, so I'm always at this base of fitness to make that decision. Have I burned out from triathlon? What was this question? Have you burned out from triathlon?
Have you ever experienced training or triathlon burnout? And what did you do to get past that.
Right. So I've never really, again, like I said, experienced training burnout, but I have, I guess I probably experienced triathlon burnout was in 2011. I did Ironman Lake Placid to do, and I didn't do it to qualify. I just wanted to do an Ironman just to do and not have that mental stress of trying to qualify. And I didn't want my season to be done. So I did my first ultra, and 6 weeks later, I jumped into a 50-mile trail run, and I really struggled and had an awful experience, yet at the same time, the best experience, because I continued on with trail running. So I didn't do triathlon for 3 years. I did one triathlon to kind of check it off my yearly list, but I was training for ultras. And so I think I would say back then, that's probably why I transitioned to trail running, because maybe I was a little bit burned out. I wouldn't even call it burnout, but I just didn't enjoy the triathlon multi-sport lifestyle. I wanted to do something different. And so that's what I did. I did something different. And then I finished my first 100 in 2013, and I missed biking. I missed training on the bike. So I got back into triathlon in 2014. And then over the years, I've kind of mixed in the trail running and the triathlon training. And now I'm mixing in the ultra running and the Ironman training kind of mixed in. And so, hopefully that answers the question. I wouldn't call it burnout, but I will say I wanted a break from the multi-sport to focus on single sport. And this year I'm going to Kona in October, and I know I'm going to probably take another break from the multi-sport and focus on ultra running, which is single sport. So that's my advice, is to try to, if you're not enjoying and loving what you do, then find something else active. And so you can, take a break from what used to be your primary sport, find something different that excites you, that the way that your multi-sport used to excite you. And then maybe by doing something else, you'll find the love again for what you used to do.
I think it depends on how long you've been doing it before this burnout kicks in, is to find something to replace it. Like you said, you found a trail running, you found ultras, but to go cold turkey, I think might be a bad idea because of the type of personality that a multi-sport athlete has.
Right. And I think that's what I mean. I didn't know I was burned out but I found something that I really enjoyed. So maybe I didn't know I was burned out, but maybe I was. But like I said, I just enjoy the fitness lifestyle more than anything. I enjoy the fitness lifestyle.
Was there a monotony with the triathlon that it's like, oh, I'm okay being fit and doing fitness things, but I need to take a break from this swim, bike, run routine?
I think, again, I don't know exactly, but I think a lot of it was the time commitment and the cycling. To be at the fitness level that I wanted to be in, the cycling took a lot of time. And I think maybe I just more or less needed a break from cycling and swimming, because I've been a swimmer my whole life. I don't really recall the details exactly, but I do know when I first started training for ultras after that 50 miler, I was giving the 100 miler the next year a chance, is I had never trained for ultras before. So I knew I needed to focus on running, and I didn't want swimming and biking to get in the way. So I continue to swim and bike maybe once a week for like my recovery workout from running. And so that kept me fit enough to at least check off and do an Olympic distance triathlon that year. But the unknown of training for an ultra made me want to not swim and bike.
Gotcha.
And then through doing ultras and trail running for 2 or 3 years made me miss the bike. And so I'm like, I want to get back into triathlon because I miss training on the bike.
I'm thinking about maybe two experiences or two ideas that when I kind of felt this way. And there was one where I kind of just challenged myself to see if I could do how many triathlons I could do in a weekend in a row, how many weekends in a row I could do one. And I did it 8 times. And by the 8th time, I was like, done. It's like, I don't want to do this. I really didn't want to do it anymore. And I think I lost sight of my why. And that was the second part of this, is that if you lose your why, it's easy to get burned out. Are you out here to finish, to get a medal? Are you out here because you love it? Are you competitive? If you're not competitive, what is the why? Is it just to be active and social? And I remember thinking, okay, I'm doing it for the wrong reasons. I was just trying to get a streak going of, hey, and I was, there was some ego involved. Like, hey, look, it was too much focused on me, which is I'm so glad I'm not that way as I was at this time in my life. It's like, look at me, I did 7 in a row. Look at me, I did 8 in a row. It's like, why? Why am I doing this? And is it for likes? Is it for attention? And there's like this immaturity, phase of that I felt like I was going through in the sport of wanting attention. And I feel like that's just true. It's what it was. I wanted like, hey, look at me, I can do this, but I'm not that big of a deal. It's like, why am I doing this? And then it's like, I don't know. I'm not interested in this anymore. And then my why changes into, hey, I'm starting a family. This is not as important anymore. I got different priorities. And then once not the family gets situated, but once there's more windows of opportunity, the why becomes strong again. And the why for me is strong, has never been stronger this year than it has in past years. So those are my answers, Kevin.
I'm glad you brought up the why, because ultimately when you're feeling burned out or not excited or questioning why you're doing something or doing the training, you always want to question, well, what's your why of signing up for a certain race, or what's your why for getting up early in the morning or going to bed very late because you got to get your workout in after the kids go to bed. Mm-hmm. And so, answering your why is probably the most important factor that's going to get you in or out of the sport. And it's okay to stop the sport. You don't have to do triathlon. I think the thing about triathlon is it's multi-sport and there's so many different distances you can train for. You don't have to train for the long distance. Maybe you like multi-sport training for fitness, and maybe you want to do the sprints on the weekend. Mm-hmm. There's just so many things you can do with being a multi-sport athlete. And it doesn't even have to involve racing. You just don't have to race. You can just train. For me, that's the best part, is the training.
And I'm going to be that get off my lawn guy and tell you, young people or beginners in the sport, no one cares about how much you're training. Nobody cares how many races you've done. Really, we're all just doing our own thing. I feel like that's just, maybe I'm just old, but I just remember where I was, and you get these Facebook reminders like 10 years ago today, or on this day so many years ago. I was like, I was such an attention whore. It's like, why do I, people don't care what I'm doing. People don't care that I did a trainer ride and I'm going out for a run now. Nobody cares, really. Maybe mom cares, maybe grandma cares, but just do it for yourself. And if any maturity I can pass along as this old guy now, do it for yourself. Do it for you. If other people recognize it, great. But in general, they have their own lives. Other things are important to them. They don't care what you're doing. I think. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
I think some of it's true. Nobody cares.
Good advice. Good advice.
But we do care about your questions. And whatever you need, we're here for you to pass along some wisdom. And I hope that we can do that, or we've done that today for Anu, Tim, Tina, Julie, Kevin, and those of you who just joined the T2 Endurance Group. Any final thoughts or things that you want to mention before we close up shop?
Wishing everyone a happy spring. I think the 20th or the 21st is this weekend. It's always a great time of year for me because it's in my birth month, and once it hits spring, it's closer and closer to summer, which is my favorite time of year.
Yeah, I'm excited as well, with more sunny, longer sunnier days, a little bit warmer weather, more opportunities to go outside and take in the fresh air. Yeah.
Yeah. And my goal is always to try to get outside on my bike on the first weekend of spring. And so that's my goal this weekend. We'll see if it happens. Just depends on the weather.
Even though I say nobody cares, we do care. We're here for you. I'm kind of being sarcastic, but a little bit truthful as well. Keep sending questions in. We appreciate you listening. For Wendy Mader, I'm Dave Erickson. Have a great week of training, racing, or recovery. Hope to see you back here next time. Adios.
Adios.